And now our closing keynote. Please welcome Richard Ellenson, assistive technology innovator, creator of the Tango AAC device, the Math Paper and TalkSuite apps, disability advocate, former CEO of the Cerebral Palsy Foundation, and Thomas's dad. His inspiring address is titled, "What Have We Learned About Learning?"
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for having me here. Actually, I was here already, so thanks for being where you are, there, while I'm here where I already was. That's pretty odd. Things sure are different now. Before I start, I'd like you all to do a small exercise. Close your eyes for one moment, now, and I'm going to count to 3. I'm going to ask you to open them and count to 3. And when you open them, look for everything in the room that you see that's green. And then I'm going to ask you to close your eyes again. Ready? Your eyes should be closed now. If they're not, close them. And now open them. 1, 2, 3. Close them again. And now tell me everything you saw in your room that's yellow. When we're looking for one thing, we so often don't discover others. And what I'm hoping we do in these next few minutes is to look at all we've learned today in a slightly different context. I'm sure you've learned so much about technology and technique and frameworks, but I want to focus on us, on you, on how we look at things and how that seems to be changing during this time, about what we've learned about learning. 22 years ago, I was an advertising creative guy who suddenly had a son with cerebral palsy. Back then, I didn't understand that much. I just knew that I wanted people to understand my son, not to feel sorry for my son, to learn how to teach him, and even more specifically, to educate him and include him. I didn't want Tom to feel isolated. Isn't that an odd thought in this time of COVID and quarantine? Lisa Belkin captured so much of that dream and the start of Tom's education in her cover article in the Sunday New York Times Magazine. The day the article came out, Tom and I walked all over New York City, stopping at every newsstand, those amazing booths that appeared every 3 or 4 blocks in our city of 8 million people. We stopped at maybe a dozen of them, 20 of them, and at each one I opened up the paper to the magazine section and I got to watch this 6-year-old kid see himself on the cover of every magazine. He was amazed. That day, and for the next week or so, so many people stopped us in the street, looking at Tom not as a poor kid in a wheelchair, but as a kid who was making it in school. It was a great moment, but we had no idea how complex the journey was going to be, how many ups and downs, and how many people would be affecting my son's life. Yes, there was room in the class for Tom, but the ability to teach him, that was, of course, harder. How much the world has changed since then, how different things are now. Today, the Times is just a great app, and that amazing piece of media real estate, it's just another digital headline. The newsstands we went past, they've been gone long before COVID happened. And today, a speech device isn't this complex piece of technology that sets you apart. You're just another kid with an iPad, or something that looks like an iPad. But one thing remains incredibly the same. Trying to educate a child with special needs is hard. If that wasn't the case, given all the work we all do, wouldn't we have so much more success? All of us at this unconference, we are people striving to do what is hard. We need to remember that and accept that. In fact, it's important to remember that there's a word for people who take on hard challenges: heroes. We should look at ourselves like that. Maybe COVID has given us a reasonable analogy. Right now, if you're a first responder or a healthcare professional willing to do what it takes to help others, you hear cheers and whistles and clanging pots every night at 7 p.m. My wife's a doctor. She says it just fills her up and keeps her going. Special educators, parents of special needs kids, those of you who also change the course of a life, I so wish you could hear that too. In fact, thank you all so much. You do so much for so many. Parents, paraprofessionals, educators, teachers, so much. But we also need to remember that teachers are not remembered for their emotions or their compassions or their kindnesses. They're remembered for what they accomplish and for the acts that they do. And as you all know, in this world, the world of special needs, in order to accomplish our goals, We need an enormous amount of knowledge and expertise and teamwork. But how do you make that happen when teachers have so much they need to do every day and parents are so time challenged in a way so few of us could even understand? How do we do this all? Maybe this difficult time has given us some answers. I've spoken to so many people over these past few months, and I've heard so many different stories. Let me tell you 3 of them. One remarkable SLP and consultant, Christine Baudin, told me that during this time, she has been able to build relationships not only with kids, but with their families in a way that never happened before. She and her many therapists she works with have been able to show parents in real time on Zooms like this how to use the tech and how to really implement pedagogy with the kids there. Parents are feeling energized and optimistic in ways they have never been before. A special educator in Virginia, Robin Verity, told me the same thing, that this time has given her the opportunity to show parents how their children learn and to teach to those needs. But she also says that some students with more significant needs are actually showing regression. The consistent structured work provided daily in the school setting is challenging to replicate in the home. And that's especially true when a parent has real-world issues, like needing to work at home or having other kids who have needs. A college student, my son, told me he loves remote learning because he's better able to ask questions in class using his speech app. And when I said to him, wait, if you can use that little chat column and put things in there, why can't you use your speech app in class? He said he doesn't like to draw attention to himself. But online, everyone is the same. One of the key advocacy groups in New York City, who essentially is tasked with advocating for all the issues faced by families, said to me, this time is exhausting. So many kids don't have the tech they need. Families are actually being asked to go to find places with better Wi-Fi. And of course, they can't make that happen. I really feel people in the DOE, though, she said, are working 30 hours a day. But just the same, because we deal with people who have issues, we hear about so many kids who are not being engaged and supported. That's a lot of diverse feedback. So how do you find themes when the feedback is all over the board? Again, if this were easy, special educators wouldn't be so special. But how do we process all this? And how do we learn from what we're hearing when educating a child today is so different than it was 10 weeks ago? I've always believed that the biggest problem in special ed is that we are all too frightened to admit to each other how hard it is, or to share our own frustrations with someone who has a different title: parent, teacher, para, administrator, student. Ironically, I believe that this catastrophic time of COVID and quarantine, this moment when it is dangerous to even go outside, has finally given our particular world of special ed a safe space where we can discuss these issues. By slowing down and isolating the many requirements necessary to provide a student with an effective education, we can suddenly see more clearly all the components that go into it. And even more importantly, the fact that when we all confront a pandemic, we need to say this. This moment is one no one could ever expected. This moment is one that none of us could be prepared for. We're not qualified for it. Well, it also seems to be allowing us to acknowledge that addressing the complex educational needs of a special needs child is also monumental. It's also something we can't think our way through. We know where we want to get, but we don't all see the same way forward. And we all see obstacles. And we have a hard time accepting that there aren't really great answers. And I don't mean it's hard for the teacher. I mean it's also hard for the parent and for the district, and perhaps most of all, for the student. Maggie Moroff, who leads ARISE, Action for Reform in Special Education, a fantastic coalition which represents so many organizations in New York City, had an important observation. She said that by definition, students with special needs are typically less independent than their peers. Yet success in remote learning typically depends to a large degree on independence and independent learning. That's as good an analysis of this moment as I have heard. And amid this pandemic, we are much more clearly seeing all these dependencies, what independence means and how we do and do not achieve it. We are seeing with clarity where we can achieve success and where it is elusive. But here's what's wonderful. We are all finally starting to admit these truths to each other. We're all starting to see that we are all trying so hard. We're all suddenly willing to admit that even with all this effort, this task is a super tough one. Everyone on this call is already beyond capacity, beyond what you ever expected. But you are all accepting that. In fact, you're all embracing it. You're here to share information as a group. We're finally talking more together and seeing how hard each one of us is working. We're realizing that we are like the blind man and the elephant. Each of us is experiencing only our part. We are touching legs or ears, a trunk, whatever. But to fully see it, we need to talk together. That child who is having trouble in math, do his parents give him money to spend and let him learn math that way? That student who is having trouble with memory, well, memory was developed when we were cavemen. It relies on the same parts of the brain that are used in wayfinding. So if someone doesn't get to explore much, say someone in a manual wheelchair, is it surprising there may be memory lapses? The student who uses alternative communication, how do we compensate that most children learn through incorrect utterances by trial and error with thousands of things that they say? But children who are taught with augmentative communication, they're taught slowly, word by word, with so much less fluency and opportunity for trial and error. We are all beginning to see that, as the great educator Dean Usher once said, to understand what it's like to go through a day as a student with special needs, imagine all the other kids in class doing their lessons while climbing up a hill with a 10-pound backpack. This time has created a wonderful perceptual shift. Parents are beginning to see how much teachers care and some of what they actually do. Teachers are beginning to see the dreams parents have for their kids and how much parents can contribute in understanding their child's challenges. Families are beginning to see how much they have to learn, that their kids won't simply get a great education because they want it to happen and care. Parents are seeing that education must also happen at home and how much more they could do to spur that on. And kids are letting us know that they want to be included. We're all seeing more clearly than ever that in order to help every child reach his or her potential, we need an interconnected environment of assistive technology, adapted materials, ways to input and output, and ways to adapt an environment. And we're learning to see even better the incredible importance of being prepared, of really having what we need around us, easily accessible, ready to implement, ready to share, able to be put right into the stream of what we do in real time. And even if we don't know how the system will afford, provide, and implement these supports, we are finally admitting that without them, none of us can do our jobs. In fact, that's part of what today's been about, learning more about the tools to make success happen. And tomorrow needs to be about finding the funds to get those tools. It is not surprising to me that so many of the success stories I hear are about therapists working with students who have the tech they need and doing it one-on-one. And so many of the issues are about trying to include someone with disabilities in the full classroom when they don't have the tech at home. Among the many things I do and have done, I am first and foremost an advocate. And advocacy is not about asking. It's about asking together, and then asking again and again, and then going to others to help them realize why you're asking and how it can help all of us, and then continuing to ask in the hopes that one day the dream will happen. In this time of COVID and quarantine, we can magnify moments almost like we can magnify pixels on our screens. And as we talk to each other, we are sharing what success is happening and where it is not. My hope is that this is what we learn most during this time. Hillary Clinton said, "It takes a village." And ironically, in this time of social distancing, that is finally how we are seeing ourselves, a village. As we end this conference, I'd like to go back to the beginning, to the wonderful performance by the Epic players. If only you knew what I could do. What a great performance. And of course, it affects us because it's not really about special needs. Don't we all wish that others knew what we were capable of? Don't we all wish people could see us for what our best selves are? As my son Tom said, that song sounds like it could be from Dear Evan Hansen. But when it comes to special needs, honestly, I don't know why that song isn't angrier. I don't know why it doesn't sound like Green Day. Because we are never going to know what those kids can do until the right supports are in place and until things are working so smoothly that we can finally focus on the potential of the student, not the difference. That is the change we need. So how can we better make this happen? And how can we take what we are learning and implement it? I love acronyms, so let me give you one. But before I do, let me ask you to close your eyes one more time. Seriously, if you didn't do it before, do it now. If you did do it before and enjoyed it, do it again. If you didn't like it, give me another chance. Close those eyes. Okay, promise? Now, we'll all do the same thing, but this time, don't look in your room. Imagine instead everything you could do. Okay, promise they are closed. Now we'll do the same thing, but this time, don't look in your room. Imagine instead everything you could get to within your home that makes you feel light and free. Even if your life is tough, think of things, a picture of your family, a favorite cooking utensil, whatever. And I'll give you 5 seconds to think of them. Okay? Close your eyes and open your eyes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, close them again. Have all those things now? Now holding this wonderful feeling and smile so you really feel it. Start moving outside of your house. Think of the sky outside your home. Think of all the other people out there. Think of the students who need you, or if you're a parent, think of all the other students who share your child's needs. Feel the openness of that world and how much there is out there that you can tap into and need to tap into. Keep your eyes closed and think of all the other people on this Zoom who are dreaming the same things. Parents, feel the desires and frustrations of teachers who are so focused on success and so limited in resources. Teachers, feel not only the dreams the parents have for their kids and the things they ask of you, but feel the fears that are so much larger than those for children who don't have these issues. Feel yourself all part of this circle. Feel yourself holding each other's hands, being in this together. See those kids thriving because of everyone with whom you are sharing this moment, and those you wish could hear everything you've experienced today. Okay, open your eyes and think of that word, open. One day, our community will again be open, but will we remain open to all we don't know, to all that we have learned, and more precisely, to all the other people who have answers for us? That is what we need to take away from this time. The openness to all we have learned, to all we've seen, and all that can change in our belief systems. Let me give you what those letters mean. O is for open. It's redundant, but it is such an important concept. Be open to all that's possible, to the idea that you don't have all the answers, but that you are a critical part of getting us all to one. P is for prepared. Please work hard to be prepared. Once you see that there's a better way to do something, master it. Whether you're a teacher who hasn't figured out how to adapt part of your class, an administrator who hasn't put together a process for inclusion that could be shared in processional trainings, or a parent who hasn't yet learned your child's technology. Preparation is tough, but you only have to do it once, and you've mastered it forever and for so many. Preparation is an intrinsic value for anybody who is a leader and for anyone who contributes. And E is for empathy. Understand the totality of the experience of getting educated. My son got his education in the New York City public school system. A child who uses a power wheelchair for mobility and a device to speak not only graduated with a Regents diploma, but is now at State University of New York at Purchase, or will be back there when it reopens. And despite many challenges and imperfections, he's doing great, living on his own. His education wasn't perfect, but it was rich and it was thoughtful. And so many people worked to support him, not only the teachers at his school, but others such as Tamara Ochoa, an amazing therapist and mentor whose work has inspired so much of what's in this talk. But for Tom's high school graduation, because the graduation stage was cramped, They told him at rehearsal that he would sit in the back, and after everyone else had walked for their diplomas in a space that couldn't fit a wheelchair, they would bring his diploma to him as he waited. Tom couldn't believe it. He said he wouldn't go. When the school heard that, they realized the error and wanted to correct it. And these were good educators, caring educators, but it was too late. Tom chose to skip graduation because he wanted the story to be remembered as it really happened. That it is not okay to not fully understand what inclusion means to an individual. That you can't just stare at papers and computer screens. That you need to always be aware of the full person you are nurturing. What sort of emotional scars does that leave? And what does it say about the extraordinary patience and resilience we expect from students with special needs? The number of things that they deal with, I don't think I could do it. And again, these were great educators who cared, but somehow they didn't take the time to prepare or have the empathy to know what this decision would feel like. That's what happens when we don't think together. And even though there are so many successes in my son's education and so many successes around this community of people, it's critical that we also discuss and acknowledge the things that don't succeed, because only then can we learn. And lastly, N is for never. Never stop beginning each and every day with the idea of being open. Be open to what is possible, open to what you can accomplish for others, open to what a network of people, teachers and therapists and parents and the students themselves can accomplish when we are not afraid to think openly and together. Parents, every day as you send your child to school, say to yourself, I will be open. Open to my child's potential and also open to the challenges of working within a system that also needs to support so many others. And to the fact that, yes, you will need to do more than other parents, but all parents have their challenges. Make sure you are prepared to help your child be ready, that you've taken the time to learn the technology they are using, and even more so, that you've learned how they learn. Because it is likely to be different from the way you do. And be open to the empathy to realize that the teachers are trying. And teachers, be open to the fact that it is very, very hard to understand the myriad of special needs you will engage with, and to understand the complexity and nuances within each of these students. And not just the cognitive issues, but the emotional ones, the spiritual ones. Be open to admitting that even though you are a great teacher, creating success may require more than you can reasonably expect of yourself. Be open to realizing that even when you are calling out a child with support or working with a therapist or a paraprofessional, that child is feeling called out. He is feeling different. And that is not a great thing to feel in our early years. All of us in this room, all of us on this Zoom, certainly share the same goals for our students. But let us also share an acceptance of how hard it may be to reach those goals. And also certainly that by working together, we have a much better chance of accomplishing it. I have always believed that the biggest challenge in special ed was finding the safe space to admit that success is so hard to accomplish, and not feeling that that admission meant that you were doing something wrong. A mother of another special needs child once said to me, do you ever feel that no matter what you do, no matter how much you do, it will never be enough? Of course, I feel that. It's an intrinsic part of being a special needs parent. But you know what? It's also part of being a special needs teacher. And that's a hard thing for any of us to feel, and harder still to admit. Yet ironically, this awful, scary time has perhaps made us all more comfortable with our own vulnerability. It has perhaps made it easier to acknowledge that things are often bigger than we are, and that even if we want to, we can't do this alone. So as we head off to tomorrow, let us think not of what we need to learn as we sit in our own homes, but of the connections we need to make now, and how to keep them going when we all get back to whatever it is out there in front of us. As so many people are saying, amid all this difficulty, challenge, and tragedy, there are many positive things we can be learning. We are seeing things that we know can make life better. Let's make special ed one of them. Let's be open to that. Thanks so much.